UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Borralho from the UFC Apex this Saturday night. We have got 10 fights on this card, soon to be 11 with the Ultimate Fighter. And yes, this is the Ultimate Fighter finale card. And I am old enough to remember when they used to do the Ultimate Fighter finales in some casino or in some resort in Las Vegas. And now it's in the UFC Apex. But hey, the Apex is going away for a little bit in November, so we have that to look forward to. But in the main event, Cannonier steps back into the octagon after his main event in Louisville, Kentucky earlier this year, where he lost to Nasruddin Imavov, and he will turn it around against the undefeated in the UFC fighter, Caio Borralho, who is 16-1 as a pro and 6-0 in the UFC. Also on this card, Shahbazyan versus Meerschaert, along with Michael Morales versus Neil Magny. And of course, I'm recording this video on Sunday, and you are seeing this video on Sunday as well. I do not know what the second Ultimate Fighter finale fight is. When I do know it, I will put a detailed prediction in the description down below. For now, we only know Robert Valentin versus Ryan Loder. The other Ultimate Fighter finale fight, I will know, I believe, what the show's on Wednesday. So I will, again, write that out in the description down below. And folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Tomorrow, we're going to post our PFL playoffs predictions. In the main event, you got Brendan Loughnane versus Kai Kamaka III. Last week on PFL, we went 1-1 on that card, and we went 7-5 on UFC. Wasn't our best UFC card, but again, we still got the main event, Dricus du Plessis beating Israel Adesanya. And we now have the Contender Series. Every single week we're going to be doing this, and we're going to start things off here with Billy Brand versus Cody Haddon in this fight. For the Australian, Haddon 6-1, his only loss being to Steve Erceg. Billy Brand 5-1 from Folsom, California. His only loss is to Peyton Talbot. So something interesting going on in this fight here. I think Haddon is better. I think he's got better striking. For Billy Brand, hasn't been anybody all that impressive. Haddon has been fighting in Hex and Eternal, which are the two better promotions over there in Australia. I think Haddon is the all-around better fighter. Again, I know he lost to Steve Erceg, who just got knocked out, but still, again, the loss to Erceg really just doesn't mean all that much. That's fine. For Billy Brand, again, a loss to Peyton Talbot really doesn't mean much either. But I just think all around, Haddon is the better striker, and I think he's going to go out here and win this fight. Again, Billy Brand hasn't fought anybody all that good yet, so I'm going to take Haddon to win this fight by second round knockout. Next up, Cam Roston versus Torres Finney. Torres Finney's the guy in this fight. Finney took on Yuri Panfrov in his last fight in the Contender Series, a fight where I believe on Tapology he was an underdog. I went with Finney in that fight. He ended up beating Panfrov by submission. Since then, he did win in Combat Night against a 15-12 Tyson Jeffries. And again, you're going to see a lot of jokes about Torres Finney on the internet just because of his build. He's 5'8", but he's got a huge reach. I think he's going to be able to go in here and win this fight against Cam Roston, whether it be on the ground or on the feet. I really like Torres Finney a lot in this fight. I think he gets it done by first round TKO. Roston has not fought anybody from Australia. His last fight, he beat a 3-6 guy. Before that, 0-0, and he just has not been all that active. He has one fight since the pandemic started. I don't know where they found this guy. He's 29 years old, and he just hasn't been fighting. Again, this fight feels like the fight to get Torres Finney into the UFC after he won last year on the Contender. I think Finney goes in here and he picks up his UFC contract by beating Cam Roston in the first round. Next up, Cortavius Romeus, I believe, taking on Michael Imperiato. If you watch Dana White looking for a fight, they went to a unified MMA card, and that's where they got Michael Imperiato. You're going to see another guy later on this card from that same unified MMA card. It's a cool story. Again, Imperiato was a guy who was signed to the UFC at one point. Dana White really didn't go into it that much, but said that something outside the octagon forced him out of the UFC, and he never fought in the UFC. He's, I think, 34, 35. Again, they're giving him the shot in the Contender, but that was just so they could fulfill the obligations of bringing guys in from Dana White looking for a fight. Cortavius should be able to go in here and win this fight. Now, I know he did lose on the Contender last year. It was the main event of the last Contender Series card against Ramon Tavares. He got knocked out in that fight. And Tavares, again, has won since in the UFC. I think, again, where Imperiato is good at, and he beat Ricky Bandejas on that unified MMA card. He got Bandejas down, took his back right away, and got the submission. That's where he's good at. But the thing is, Cortavius has got a really good ground game as well. I think he's able to, again, out-scramble Imperiato on the ground. I'm taking Cortavius Romeus to win the fight by second round sub. To our heavyweight fight in the co-main event, Rizvan Kuniev takes on Hugo Cunha in this fight. For Kuniev, this is a guy who fought in the Contender Series back 2 years ago or 3 years ago. One, did not get the contract. He's fought in Eagle FC before, and again, he had a draw in PFL a year ago against the champion, the guy who's going to be fighting Francis Ngannou later this year, and Hernan Ferreira. Went to a majority draw, I believe, with Ferreira. He was the Eagle FC heavyweight champion where he beat Anthony Freight Train Hamilton. But now he's getting a shot again in the UFC. He's a Dagestani guy taking on Hugo Kiana, who I don't know entirely how this guy makes 265 pounds. He is absolutely huge. He is 6'4", and he is massive. He is the reigning LFA heavyweight champion. Beat Eduardo Neves in his last fight by arm triangle choke. This is a tremendous fight. I think you're going to get a really solid heavyweight prospect coming out of the winner of this fight. I do think it is going to be Kuniev. I think Kuniev is able to go out there and ground and pound his way to victory. I'm going to take him by second round TKO, but I think it's a very well put together fight. The winner of this fight, again, is going to be a pretty solid guy for the UFC, but I think Kuniev does get it done. I like the experience. I liked what he did in Eagle FC. Given against bad, not great opponents, but still, I like Kuniev a lot in this fight. I think he gets it done. Our main event, Pat Pitlick taking on Andreas Gustafsson. Gustafsson, excuse me. I think it's Gustafsson, like Alexander Gustafsson. Again, both from Sweden, but Pat Pitlick taking on Gustafsson. Pitlick's 35 years old, but actually I'm going to go with Pitlick to win this fight. Matchup-wise, I like Pitlick a lot here. I think he wins the fight by first-round knockout. He's a guy that they found from Unified MMA. He won against Ryan Leninger by first-round knockout. I think it was first-round knockout. I like him a lot in this fight because Gustafsson is a guy with a Greco background who can strike and who has power, but Pitlick is a pure striker who's got decent defensive wrestling. I think Pitlick keeps this fight standing, and I think he wins. I think he does get the better of Gustafsson on the feet here. I think he's a pretty sizable underdog, but Gustafsson hasn't beaten anybody that's impressed me all that much yet. Again, beating a 13-10 guy's last fight, beating an 8-4 guy before that, lost to Jailton Luderbach before that by majority decision. I like Pitlick to go out here and shock a lot of people. I think he wins this fight by first-round knockout. Again, look good in his Unified MMA fight. I think Pitlick does win as an underdog in the main event. Let's go on to now the UFC card. We start things off with a minus 800 favorite in the opener. Yes, minus 800. We've got Kong Wang taking on Victoria Leonardo. Victoria Leonardo, I don't know how she's still in the UFC. I'll be completely honest with you. She is 9-5 as a professional mixed martial arts fighter, and again, she is still in the best fighting promotion in the world. Leonardo, I forgot she beat Mandy Baum, didn't she? I forgot that fight happened. Leonardo doesn't really do anything all that well. She wrestles, sure. Her only win in the UFC is Mandy Baum, who is horrible. She beat her by unanimous decision. Her losses are to decent fighters. I will give her credit, I guess, credit for that. Manon Fior, Melissa Gatto, Natalia Silva, not bad fighters, but she's been finished in all three of those fights. The Joker, Kong Wang, comes off road to UFC. That's where she won her last fight against Paula Luna, where she won the fight by guillotine choke in the first round. I would expect Kong Wang to go in here and win this fight and win it pretty decisively. Victoria Leonardo has a little bit of a grappling game. Other than that, she's pretty just mediocre everywhere. Kong Wang should be able to get this fight down if she needs to, or she should be able to outstrike her way to victory. I think she's going to get a takedown, and I just think she's going to dominate in terms of the defense, or in terms of the grappling as a whole. I think she finds her way to a lot of spots where she can get off a lot of punches and ground and pound once the fight has hit the mat. I'm taking Kong Wang to win the fight by second round TKO. Regardless if it is because of the grappling or just because of the straight striking. That's how bad Victoria Leonardo is. She's just not good at fighting, guys. She's 34 years old. Her only win is Mandy Baum. I get it. She's lost some decent fighters, but she's looked horrible in all of those fights. Kong Wang, again, is 5-0. Doesn't really set the world on fire. Her only decent wins against a 5-2 fighter. That's fair. I just think she's so much better in terms of her boxing and her grappling too. I think either way, Kong Wang's going to be able to get a finish. We are taking her, and yes, a women's MMA fight. I'm picking a finish. Kong Wang by second round TKO. As we go on to our next one here, another women's MMA fight. We've got Josiane Nunes versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti in this fight. I'm going to probably lean towards Josiane Nunes in this fight, but this one is interesting. Nunes is 10-2. She was undefeated in the UFC until, of course, I put actual money on her to beat Chelsea Chandler, and she loses. Now, I thought those odds were ridiculous. I thought, okay, Nunes is going to mop the floor at Chelsea Chandler. I think a lot of people expected that, and Josiane Nunes laid a complete egg in that fight. It was the moment I realized this sport might not be for me. No, I'm joking, but still. Again, Nunes just got out-grappled in that Chandler fight. Chandler beat her to the punch every single time. Again, it just wasn't that great. It wasn't an entertaining fight. Chandler was doing all right in the striking ranges, but again, where Chelsea Chandler won that fight was through the grappling. For Cavalcanti here, again, not much of a grappler. She's going to go in there and strike with Josiane Nunes, and that's where I think Josiane Nunes has probably the best chance to win this fight. It's very interesting that Josiane Nunes comes into this fight as an underdog, just because, again, yes, Cavalcanti looked good in her first fight in the UFC, but who did she fight? Zara Farron. Exactly, Zara Farron, who did fight Josiane Nunes, and Josiane Nunes, in all fairness, had a much closer fight against Zara Farron than Jacqueline Cavalcanti did, and 100%, Cavalcanti dominated Zara Farron, and Zara Farron was somewhat competitive with Josiane Nunes. However, that's not how mixed martial arts works. MMA is a very weird sport, and I still think, as a whole, Josiane Nunes is slightly better. I think Josiane Nunes does pose more of a threat with her power. I think she does hit harder. She is very short for the weight class, which does, it's difficult. She is like Jessica Andrade at 135 pounds, but just not as good, right? I think she wins. I'm taking Josiane Nunes by unanimous decision. Cavalcanti's only win is Zara Farron. And I understand, again, Josiane Nunes' last win is Zara Farron. But she does have wins prior to that in the UFC. A win over Bia Malecki and a win over Ramona Pasquale. Again, these are bottom of the barrel 135-pounders and 145-pounders. I 100% understand that. And again, this is a women's MMA fight, and really anything can happen. And it's, again, a lot of these women's MMA fights are coin flips, I'm going to be honest with you. But I do think Josiane Nunes is slightly better. I do think she poses more of a threat in terms of power. I do think, again, if we get into some of these exchanges, I think Josiane Nunes will win a lot because of the damage she's going to be able to inflict. I understand Cavalcanti beat Zara Farron to the punch every single time in their fight. At the same time, though, I think Josiane Nunes is able to do more damage. I think she hits harder, and that's why I think Josiane Nunes wins this fight, basically just on power and the damage she's able to do. But again, it's a women's MMA fight. It can go either way. Don't put your hard-earned money on this fight because, again, women's MMA is stupid sometimes. I am going to go with Josiane Nunes to win the fight by decision, though. I think, again, she wins based off damage. I'm going to take Josiane Nunes by unanimous decision. We go on to the lightweight division. Slava Claus has worked his way all the way to an Apex undercard fight. He's going to be taking it on James Llontop, where the loser of this fight may get cut from the UFC. For Llontop, maybe if he loses, they'll probably keep him around. But for Slava Claus, he's got to win this one to remain in the UFC. This is a guy at one point who was 7-1, 6-1. He's lost 3 out of his last 5 fights. 3 of 4 if you don't include the draw. A loss to Mark DeCasey, Mike Davis, and Chase Hooper in his last fight, I believe in St. Louis, where he got taken down and Darst in the second round. A win over Meerschaert, and then a majority draw to Nazim Sadikov, where Sadikov just absolutely blew it in that fight. It was ridiculous. And again, the same thing can be said about Slava Borshchev in almost all of his fights. Good striker, just gets beat on the ground. However, his last fight, he got beat everywhere. Chase Hooper ran through this guy. It was not a competitive fight. Chase Hooper beats him on the feet, knocks him down in the first round, and just dominates the fight on the ground. I mean, completely one-sided fight. Chase Hooper 10-8s him in the first round, and then again gets the finish in the second. It was a one-sided beatdown. I have never seen a Chase Hooper fight more one-sided than the Slava Claus fight. Now Slava Borshchev gets James Llontop. Now, Llontop's a guy who's not going to grapple with you. He's pretty bad at that as well. You look at his first fight in the UFC, it's a loss to Chris Padilla. Padilla goes in there and gets the submission in the first round. Llontop missed weight in that fight, and Llontop was a minus 450 favorite going into that one, and he loses because, again, he got beat on the ground. You're not going to see Llontop engage in a grappling fight with Slava Borshchev, and again, Slava Claus is not going to do the same thing coming back the other way. So ultimately, you're going to see a striking fight in this one, something that benefits both guys. And again, if you are Team Alpha Male's own Slava Borshchev and you're looking at this fight, and again, you're going to be cut if you lose, this is the style of fight you want. At least, again, if you lose this fight, you're going to get beat on the feet where you want the fight, rather than just getting put on your back for 15 minutes, which is something that, again, Slava Claus has dealt with a lot so far in his UFC career, and something he is going to continue to deal with even if he wins this fight, which I think he does. I think Slava Borshchev does win this one. I'm going to take him to win the fight by second round knockout. Now, Again, he looked horrible in the Chase Hooper fight, but you are going to see a striking fight with him and Llontop, and I'm really not all that impressed with James Llontop. The win over Malik Lewis, it is what it is on the Contender Series, but Malik Lewis is a guy who's lost twice in the Contender to Trevor Peek and Llontop. He's a 6-2 professional MMA fighter who does not have a really good win, except for, I think he's got a win over Marcos Vinicius, a guy who's 15-3 at the time, but the guy's now 15-7. So yeah, again, like, Malik Lewis was who, Llontop being the Contender to get the Padilla fight. Again, Lewis is not all that great of a guy. I think Slava Borshchev wins this one. I think he gets the finish in the second round. I do think, again, you see a back and forth striking battle, but I do think Slava Claus is slightly better on the feet. I'm just not that impressed with Llontop. Again, did not look good in the Chris Padilla fight, and I understand, again, Padilla took him down, but you can say the same thing pretty much about every Slava Borshchev fight. When he is facing a guy who's just going to stand and strike with him, he dominates usually. Again, Chase Hooper, I understand he lost to, and Chase Hooper beat him on the feet. However, again, there is always the threat of the takedown, and again, that's the biggest kryptonite to Slava Borshchev's game, is that, again, his opponent will go in there and take him down and give him trouble. He was always worrying about that in the Chase Hooper fight. There is nothing to worry about in this fight with Slava Borshchev and with Llontop, because you're going to get a pure striker coming back at him. When Slava Borshchev has fought straight strikers, I'm looking at Meerschaert. That's kind of it. He has dominated. I think that's what he does in this fight. Again, you look at the Meerschaert fight, 3 knockdowns in that fight. I think he's able to do, maybe not to that extent against Llontop, but I think he dominates. Give me Vasyslav Borshchev to win this fight by second round TKO. To our next one, in the middleweight division, we've got Zach Reese taking on Jose Medina. And again, it's an Apex card, so you're going to get fights like this. But man, this just is not very good of a fight. You've got two guys who, you know, are just UFC fighters. I don't know why Jose Medina's in the UFC. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is a guy who lost in the Contender Series to Magomed Gadzhiesulov by unanimous decision, and right away he's getting signed to the UFC. I don't understand what we're doing here. He got dominated in that fight. Gadzhiesulov dominated him on the ground. Jose Medina really had no offense to offer up. I don't know how this guy's in the UFC. Truly, I don't know. And again, I'm not hating on the guy. I'm just being, straight up honest with you. I don't understand how this happened. Zach Reese is a guy who is 1-1 in the UFC. I forgot he beat Julian Marquez in his last fight, ran through the guy, absolutely dusted him, knocked him out in the first round. I believe that was in the Louisville, Kentucky card, the one that was main evented by Cannonier and Imavov. His first fight in the UFC, Cody Brundage beat him, which is not a great look, but still, he loses the fight by slam TKO in the first round, and then he goes out there and absolutely dusts Julian Marquez in his second fight. I don't know why Jose Medina's in the UFC. He lost all 3 rounds in that fight with Gadzhiesulov in the Contender Series. He lost every single round. He got taken down every single round, dominated on the mat, didn't really offer up any offense in the feet. And for Zach Reese, again, this is a guy who looked pretty good in that Julian Marquez fight, showed off the power. He was able to go in there in the Contender Series, get an armbar finish in the first round. I just don't know why Medina's in the UFC. And on top of that, again, the UFC rarely just does 1-fight deals, so he's probably going to stick around for a second fight. Again, I'm not hating on the guy, but he's 33 years old. He's lost coming up the Contender Series from Bolivia. Hasn't really beat anybody all that impressive outside the UFC. 2 fights ago, he was fighting a guy who was 11-22 in Samurai Fight House in 2022 over in Argentina. Again, I'm not impressed at all. Seriously, I'm not. Zach Reese has an advantage on the feet. He has an advantage on the ground. Zach Reese by any way he wants it. And again, that is a lot of push on a guy who's only 1-1 in the UFC, but I just don't think Jose Medina is that good. I'm taking Zach Reese to win this fight and do it pretty dominantly. I'm taking Zach Reese to win the fight by first round knockout. Again, Tapology, 94% of voters are going with Zach Reese. I believe he is the biggest favorite on the entire card, which he should be, because again, I don't know why Jose Medina is in the UFC. What does Medina do well? He brawls. That's kind of all he does. He doesn't even exceptionally do that well. He just kind of brawls and he tries to win, again, firefights in the feet. If he gets into a firefight with Zach Reese, he has a chance. Don't get me wrong. He's going to have a puncher's chance, but I just don't think he's going to be all that successful in doing so. I think Reese is going to find that power shot before Medina does, and that's where we are going to go with Zach Reese to win his 3rd fight in the UFC by beating Jose Medina by first round knockout. Hey, again, it's an Apex card. The names aren't the greatest, but we are getting a lot of finishes. Let's see if we get one here. Dennis Buzukja taking on Danny Silva in the featherweight division. For Dennis Buzukja, this is a guy who is 12-4 professionally, coming off a win in his last fight, his first UFC W over Connor Matthews. Matthews was always a guy coming off the Contender Series, which, you know, again, he won the Contender, but always a questionable guy, I thought, in the regional scenes. He's taking on Danny Silva as Dennis Buzukja here, who is 1-0 in the UFC with a victory over Joshua Kulibau in his last fight by split decision. Now, Kulibau showed some of the worst fight IQ I've ever seen in his last fight. He had Ricardo Ramos dead to rights in that second round last night, and he said, "Oh, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm gonna go for one shot on the ground per like 25 seconds and just played around with the guy, let Ramos get back in the fight and let Ramos win the fight." Now, I thought Kulibau got robbed. Don't get me wrong. I thought he got completely robbed in that fight, but it was ridiculous. I don't know what he was doing. Now, Danny Silva is coming off a split decision victory over Kulibau. It's a really tough fight to score, I'll be honest with you. I thought Kulibau got it. Danny Silva does win on the ground in parts of that fight, but I thought Kulibau did enough damage in the first and in that second round to win the fight. Again, it's just a matter of what you value more. Do you value damage or do you value control time? I just didn't think Danny Silva did all that much with his control time in the first and second rounds. That's why I thought Kulibau got it. And the same thing can be said in the Ricardo Ramos fight. I don't know how you score that third round for Ricardo Ramos. He got a takedown with a minute left. He was losing in the feet in that third round. He got a takedown with a minute left, and he just kind of laid on Kulibau and just kind of held on to him for the last minute of the fight, and then you give that guy the decision. I think it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. Again, one judge last night scored a fight 30-27 for Tai Tuivasa over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Absolutely ridiculous. But for Danny Silva in this fight, Dennis Buzukja here, again, he's going to go in there, he's going to wrestle. That's what guys have done to Buzukja a lot so far in his UFC career, right? Again, Sean Woodson, not known for being a grappler, went to a wrestling-heavy style when he did fight Buzukja. Went in there, took him down in the second and the third round, ended up winning that fight 30-27. But that's kind of the pathway to beat Buzukja. Again, he's coming off a third round knockout finish over Connor Matthews. Wins performance of the night, looks good in doing so. But again, I don't know how much you can put into beating Connor Matthews. Nothing against the guy. I just don't think Connor Matthews is the greatest UFC name. But Buzukja did go out there and outstruck Connor Matthews. Had a close second round with him, but in that third did pull away and ended up getting that finish. I just think Danny Silva is going to give him problems both on the feet and on the ground. I think Danny Silva just as a whole is the all-around, he's the more well-rounded fighter and is all-around way better than Buzukja. Buzukja, again, 1-2 in the UFC, losses to Jamal Emmers where he got knocked out in the first round, and then a decision loss to Sean Woodson. I just think Danny Silva has more ways to beat Dennis Buzukja. I think he's got more ways to beat him on the feet and on the ground. As a whole, I just think Danny Silva is better, and I think he just outclasses Buzukja pretty much every single place this fight ends up. I think Danny Silva has the advantage. So I'm going to go with Danny Silva to win this fight by unanimous decision. As we go on to our main card, again, we do not know the first Ultimate Fighter fight, but we do know this, or we don't know the second, we do know the first. Ryan Loder taking on Robert Valentin in this fight. Loder 6-1. Valentin, who I believe is Swiss, if I'm not mistaken, yes, from Switzerland, 10-3. The nickname is Rob Zilla in this fight for Robert Valentin. Taking on Ryan Loder, who is all right, has a win over Leon Shahbazyan back in 2023. I'll be honest, I am not the most avid watcher of The Ultimate Fighter. Again, Valentin, I think, is expected to win this fight. I don't know odds on this one. I made the graphics yesterday. I can check right now to see if odds are up for this fight. I would expect Valentin to be minus 250 favorite, give or take, going into this one. Let's see if there are odds for this fight, if I can find any. I can't right now, but I do think Valentin's going to go out here and win this fight. I just think all around he's better than Ryan Loder. Yes, Loder's striking game is not horrible, but I think Valentin has the clear advantage on the ground, and on the feet, I do think this fight's very evenly matched as well. I think Valentin's got a chance to beat him up there, but on the ground, too, I think Valentin is definitely just better. Again, he's ran through guys in the past, right? Coming in from, given Lions FC was the last fight promotion he fought in before the Ultimate Fighter, he had a 15-25 guy, which is never great. But Valentin has gone out. He's won fights by rear naked choke in the first round and such forth. He's just been a very all-around good grappler so far in his regional scene, in his regional MMA career. Taking on Loder, who has gone out there, gotten finishes. His one loss is to Troy Green on Uriah Faber's A1 Combat, and that's where Loder has been fighting some. He has had two fights over there. Won one by knockout in the first round, lost the other by split decision. Since then, back-to-back wins against Leon Shahbazyan and then Luan Davis in his last one by unanimous decision. I just think Valentin's better. I think, again, Valentin has a clear advantage on the ground and on the feet, too. I think this fight is pretty evenly matched as well. I think Valentin does win this fight. I'm going to take him to get this one done by second round TKO. I think it's going to be a takedown. I think it's going to be ground and pound out of Valentin that wins him this fight. I'm a little bit questionable on Loder too. The guy is 33 years old and he's had 7 professional mixed martial arts fights. Valentin 29, he's had 13 professional MMA fights. The experience goes to Valentin, who is the younger fighter who is just entering his prime as well. Loder at 33 years old. Again, not old for middleweight, but kind of old to be making your UFC debut. That's why I do think Valentin does go out here and win. I think, again, all around just the better fighter. I think he's got better. I think the striking's very, very evenly matched, but I do think the grappling definitely favors Robert Valentin. I think Valentin's able to get takedowns in this fight. I think he's able to do a lot of damage once he does get the fight down as well. So we are taking another finish on this card. I believe, we've only picked 1 decision so far. No, we picked Josiane Nunes to win by decision. 2 decisions so far in this card. The rest have been finishes in our picks. I'm taking Robert Valentin to go out there and beat Ryan Loder. I think he gets it done by second round TKO. As we go on to the welterweight division, Neil Magny takes on Michael Morales, and they keep doing this to Neil Magny. Every fight he has, it feels like he's taken on another highly touted prospect. And again, enter Michael Morales. This guy's really good. Truly, Morales is a guy who's been teetering on that top 15 for a very long time. This is his opportunity to break into the top 15. He is a very good striker who doesn't get hit all that much and just dominates a lot of fights on the feet. You want to talk about how Carlos Prates was impressive in his last fight last night against the Leeching Liang. Again, Michael Morales is another one of these up-and-coming prospects at 170 pounds who's just going to give a lot of guys problems just because of his striking game. And again, you don't want to see 2 prospects, again, go at it right away, but I love a fight between Carlos Prates and Michael Morales. The thing with Morales is doesn't really get finishes as much as a guy like Prates does do. Morales so far in the UFC 4-0, I believe 2 finishes to start and then 2 decisions. Yeah, so comes in, wins on the Contender Series, comes in, beats Trevin Giles by first round knockout at UFC 270 in Anaheim on a main card of a pay-per-view, beats Adam Fugit by third round TKO, then beats Max Griffin, then beats Jake Matthews after that, both by decision, and now he gets the Haitian sensation in Neil Magny. Now, again, nobody thought Neil Magny had a chance in the Mike Malott fight in Canada, and look what happened, right? Again, Malott was 15 seconds away from winning that fight, but in that third round, he gassed, and again, Neil Magny just started to take over that fight and ended up winning it. The veteran experience of Neil Magny won him that fight. And Magny, again, keeps getting put in these opportunities to beat up-and-coming prospects, and usually, let's be honest, he loses, right? But sometimes, again, Magny does come out on the winning edge, right? Like, you've seen him against Shavkat Rakhmonov. You saw him against Ian Machado Gary, Mike Malott, and now Michael Morales. They keep testing these up-and-coming guys because, again, Neil Magny, say what you want about the guy, he is the definition of the gatekeeper to the top 15. That's what he is. He's had 32 fights in the UFC. This will be his 33rd fight in the UFC this Saturday night. He's 22-10 in the UFC. He holds, I believe Neil Magny's like 6th, 5th all time in wins in the UFC. Again, anyone who's over 20 wins in the UFC, it's a big deal. Neil Magny is over that. And Neil Magny is 37 years old. He'll be around for a little bit as well. Again, at the end of the day, Neil Magny might be, I have to look the record for most UFC wins. It's Jim Miller, right? I don't know if Neil Magny's going to overtake that, but I'm just saying let's see how many Jim Miller has. Most wins, if I can find it. I don't know why this is so hard to find. I can find most fights, Jim Miller 44. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Jim Miller at 26, Arlovsky, Cerrone 23, Oliveira, Magny, Poirier, Holloway, Damian Maia, all with 22. I don't know if Magny is going to catch up to Jim Miller because Jim Miller is still fighting and Jim Miller is still doing his thing at 40 years of age. And Miller does fight some of these contender guys who are making their way up, and he does fraud check a lot of these guys, especially guys who are coming straight off the Contender Series for their first fight in the UFC. They get Jim Miller and Jim Miller beats them. Just because Neil Magny is fighting better competition, I don't know if he's going to break Jim Miller's record, but I do think there's a chance when it's all said and done, Neil Magny ends up with the 3rd most wins in UFC history. I expect Max Holloway to eventually be number 1, I'm going to be honest with you, just because, again, Holloway's only, 30, right? I know Holloway's fought for a while, but he's 32. I would expect Max Holloway to eventually break the record and be the all-time wins leader in the UFC. But hell, I think eventually someday it's going to be Holloway, Miller, Magny as the top 3 win leaders in the UFC. However, I don't think Neil Magny beats Michael Morales. I think he's going to get stuck at range in this fight, and I just think Michael Morales is going to beat him to the punch every single time. I don't know where Neil Magny really has the edge in this one, I'll be honest with you. Maybe it will be with the takedowns, but only a couple of guys have ever taken down Michael Morales, or at least no one so far has had success taking down Morales. Adam Fugit shot 8 takedowns on him, scored 1, and really couldn't do much with that. Trevin Giles in Morales' first fight in the UFC went 1 for 4 in his takedowns, really didn't do much with that either. I believe Max Griffin tried to take down Morales, he went 0 for 8. Jake Matthews, he went 0 for 1. So I mean, again, it's hard to take down Michael Morales. He is a very good defensive wrestler who is going to punish you on the feet. He's got a very sniperish-like striking game, and yes, maybe he doesn't hit with the power like a guy like Carlos Prates does. And again, that's the comp I'm going to make just because we watched Carlos Prates last night on the main card of UFC 305. And again, there's a reason why Prates is on the main card of pay-per-views and Michael Morales is on the main card of fight nights in the Apex, but still, this is a very excellent fight. Before the Jared Cannonier and Caio Borralho fight was announced, I thought this fight was going to be the main event. I'm happy it's not, just because we got the Caio Borralho Cannonier fight now too. But I think Morales wins. I'm going to take Michael Morales to win this fight by unanimous decision. Magny is a pretty tough guy to put away. He's only been finished twice on the feet so far in his entire career. One comes in that main event, I believe, in Argentina against Santiago Ponzinibbio back in 2018. And the other one is a loss to Lorenz Larkin back at UFC 202. That's Diaz McGregor 2 back in 2016. I think Morales wins. I think he picks Neil Magny apart from distance on the feet. I think that jab's going to be huge. And again, I think Michael Morales is going to just be able to beat Neil Magny to the punch every single time in this fight. Magny is going to be considerably slower compared to Morales in this one, and I just don't think he's going to be able to get a takedown either because of Michael Morales' defensive wrestling game. So as a whole, again, Morales is set up for the top 15. How much success does he have once he gets to that top 15? I don't know. But in this fight, this is his way to break into the rankings. Real quick, I will check Neil Magny's ranking. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's like 14 if he's still ranked. Oh, no, Neil Magny's 12. Okay, well, yeah, Michael Morales definitely going to be in the top 12 of the weight class after this win. I think he gets it done against Neil Magny. Give me Michael Morales by unanimous decision over Neil Magny. Okay, Edmen Shahbazyan versus Gerald Meerschaert. What a fight, right? Like, Edmen Shahbazyan at one point, again, I say it every time I talk about the guy, but I'm going to say it here. At one point, one of the most highly touted prospects in the UFC. This guy was a minus like 400 favorite to beat Derek Brunson in a main event at the Apex in 2020. He loses the fight by 3rd round TKO, then loses to Jack Hermansson, loses to Nasruddin Imavov, beats Dalcha Lujiambula, loses to Anthony Hernandez, and he beat AJ Dobson in a fight that got a little bit tricky at points, got very tricky at points, but he came through and he won the fight. Because at one point in that fight, he got wobbled by AJ Dobson, and I was very concerned. He gets Gerald Meerschaert, who is not a threat to beat him on the feet, but a threat to beat him on the ground. Now, Edmen Shahbazyan is a pretty sizable favorite. He's coming in at minus 265. You look at Tapology, I believe 83% of voters are going with Edmen Shahbazyan, 17% are going with Gerald Meerschaert. GM3 has a legitimate chance to win this fight, and more than a legitimate chance to win this fight. Edmen Shahbazyan really lacks grappling at times and lacks very good wrestling. I don't know why. Okay, my camera's gonna be like this for the rest of this fight. My apologies. Actually, I can do this. But he lacks really good wrestling. And, you know, that's how Anthony Hernandez beat him. That's how he lost to Jack Hermansson. Derek Brunson dominated the fight on the ground as well. Where do we go in this one for Shahbazyan? I mean, again, he has to keep the fight standing against Gerald Meerschaert, because if he doesn't, he's going to lose. Because again, you look at Meerschaert, you look at the tail of the tape here, or has as many submissions as he has, 28 submissions in his pro career. Again, you don't get that off luck. Again, that is a career's worth of dominating fights in the ground, drowning guys once the fight hits the mat, and that's what Meerschaert does. That is his entire game, is purely going in there and just swarming guys on the ground. Can he do that to Shahbazyan is the question, because if Shahbazyan can stuff the takedowns, he will win this fight. I think Edmen wins, and this is why. He's got to know the takedown's coming, and Meerschaert can strike a little bit, but compared to the other guys Shahbazyan's lost to, Hermansson, Hernandez, and Brunson, those guys can mix their striking with their grappling and with their wrestling. They can mix that all in together. Gerald Meerschaert doesn't do that all that well. He's not, again, And there's a reason, again, Gerald Meerschaert's not in the top 15 of the weight class, unlike those 3 guys I stated. It's because he can't mix it up as well. And it's because he's a little bit chinny at times, and his striking is just simply not that good. At the same time, Shahbazyan's grappling is not very good either, but I do think Edmund is able to go into this fight and realize that Gerald Meerschaert's only way of beating him is if he can take him down. And as long as Shahbazyan can keep the fight standing, he will win. Again, it's the same thing that, I don't think Joe Pyfer's ground game is as bad as Shahbazyan's is, but it was the same thing we kind of talked about before Joe Pyfer fought Gerald Meerschaert. Again, Joe Pyfer should mop the floor with Gerald Meerschaert on the feet, but if Meerschaert can get on the ground, it will get interesting. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think Shahbazyan is able to keep the fight standing, and with that, I do think he's going to go out here and win this fight. I'm taking Edmund Shahbazyan by first round knockout, but again, this fight could go one of 2 very different ways. Either Shahbazyan locks in, gets a bunch of, stuffs a bunch of takedowns, or gets to Meerschaert before Meerschaert can get to him, or Gerald Meerschaert goes for the legs, gets Shahbazyan down, takes his back, and submits him. I don't know, again, if he'll be able to get that submission, but I do think he will be able to give Shahbazyan hell if he is able to get a takedown, because Shahbazyan just doesn't really fight all that well off his back. Again, Anthony Hernandez was able to finish him on the ground. Nasruddin Imavov was able to finish him from the crucifix. Derek Brunson got him down, beat him with ground and pound, and again, the Brunson fight was easy for Brunson to get takedowns. We will see how Shahbazyan takes this one, but I do think, again, he knows what the game plan is going to be out of Gerald Meerschaert. He is a very one-dimensional guy. He will not be confused. I hope not, with many of the feints that Meerschaert is going to throw to mix in the takedowns. I think Shahbazyan should be fine in this fight. I'm going to take Edmund Shahbazyan to beat Gerald Meerschaert by first round knockout. If he doesn't beat Gerald Meerschaert, I don't know where his career is going, but honestly, I don't know where his career is going regardless at this point. Shahbazyan is still fairly young, right? He's only 26 years old. He's not even really in his prime yet. I do think Shahbazyan gets back in the win column or stays in the win column with a victory over Gerald Meerschaert. I think he gets it done by first round knockout. Okay, it's the fight that you've all been waiting for. Angela Hill versus Tabitha Ricci in the co-main event. I don't know how this gets the co-main event spot over Neil Magny, Michael Morales, but it is what it is. Angela Hill is back in another co-main event. And again, Angela Hill fights are hard to pick, legitimately, because sometimes she's really good and sometimes she's really bad. I mean, she's 17-3 as a professional, 17-13, excuse me. Back-to-back wins over Denise Gomez and Luana Pinheiro, where she got a mounted guillotine win over Luana Pinheiro. Her only submission win of her professional mixed martial arts career came in her last win against Luana Pinheiro. And now here she is against Tabitha Ricci. And again, I've been picking Angela Hill actually a lot recently, and I think, let me see my track record on Angela Hill picks. I think I've been doing pretty well with Angela Hill fights recently. Yeah, I have. I've gotten the last 3 Angela Hill fights right. So we picked her to beat Luana Pinheiro, we picked her to beat Denise Gomez, and we picked Mackenzie Dern to beat her. Now, I felt so good about Angela Hill beating Denise Gomez. It felt like such a Angela Hill fraud check type fight. Denise Gomez is coming off a huge win where she knocked out Yasmin Yayargi in the first round. And what does Angela Hill do? She goes in there and she gatekeeps the top 15 and she beats Denise Gomez by unanimous decision. And again, coming off a submission victory over Pinheiro, a fighter who's in and out the top 15, now you get Ricci versus Hill, which again, Ricci is a fighter who is in and out of the top 15. I believe she's ranked right now. Let's see. She is... Ricci's number 11. Yeah, Ricci's 11. Angela Hill is number 9. So again, Angela Hill is the gatekeeper to the top 10. She beat Lupi Godinez, right? Like, she beat Emily Ducote. She's 1-4 of 5. The only loss being to Mackenzie Dern. Hill has been able to beat these type of fighters, and I'm not saying she's going to go out there and beat Tabitha Ricci, but just recently, those are the type of fighters Hill has been able to beat. She's just been able to go out there and just kind of out-veteran them, out-experience these fighters. When Hill needs a round, she can, again, go to her striking, go to her wrestling, but she's just been able to find ways to win fights. For Tabitha Ricci, didn't impress me that much in her win over Tisha Torres or Tisha Pennington. It was just a very mediocre fight that Ricci ended up winning. Where Ricci does win fights, though, is in the clinch. That's where she wins them. She wins fights in the clinch, and she just controls, and she kind of just holds on, and she outpowers fighters to a certain point by just, again, this is what she did to Tisha Torres. Got Tisha Torres back up against the fence in St. Louis and just kind of held her there, threw in some knees, and just did enough. And that was just enough for, Tabitha Ricci to win the fight. It was a very close fight. I thought Ricci barely got the nod. But again, a very close fight. And that's kind of what she's going to have to do to Angela Hill in this one. But I'm a little bit concerned because, again, Angela Hill has kind of seen that style of fight before. She has fought decent wrestlers and decent jiu-jitsu players who have kind of just held her back up against the fence and try to do that same exact thing. I don't know. This is a tough fight for me to pick. It really is. I ever so slightly am going to go with Tabitha Ricci to get it done by decision, but I could definitely see a world where Hill just, again, stays off that, doesn't let Ricci control her at all, and just, boxes her head off for 15. Actually, okay, I wouldn't say that extreme. I don't think Angela Hill can really box anybody's head off, but just, again, uses her jab and just, again, doesn't let Ricci hit her and just stays out the way of any damage and stays out the way of any tie-up situations, because that's definitely how Angela Hill should be able to win this fight. I think Ricci, though, does make it somewhat boring. I think she clinches up. I think she holds her back up against the fence. I think she does get a couple takedowns in this one. And ultimately, that's how I think Tabitha Ricci wins this fight. I'm going to take her to win this fight by unanimous decision. But again, I would not be surprised in the slightest with an Angela Hill victory. I'm going to go Ricci to take it, though. I think, again, her jiu-jitsu, if the fight is to the mat, should be able to win her a lot of spots in the ground. But I think it's all about the control time in this fight. I think the striking, I think Hill's the better striker, but I think Ricci's going to stay competitive enough to the point where all she has to do is just get inside, grapple some, push her back up against the fence, and just win in moments. Not moments, but win minutes of just holding Hill back up against the fence and just make it kind of boring. I'm taking Tabitha Ricci, though, to win the fight by unanimous decision. As we go on to our main event, Jared Cannonier versus Caio Borralho in this fight. Jared Cannonier was a fight away from the belt, in my opinion, in his last fight. I thought if he beat Nassourdine Imavov, I thought, again, he was the rightful next challenger for the championship, considering, again, decently sized win streak, wins over Vettori. Strickland looked really good in the Vettori fight. Beat Sean Strickland. If he beat Imavov, I thought he should have been fighting for the belt next. Now, lost to Imavov. He got screwed on the stoppage of that fight. However, again, he was in trouble, but still, I don't think the fight should have been stopped. But now the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier, gets Caio Borralho, which is just such a difficult fight for anyone in the weight class. Caio Borralho's really good. He's a very tough guy for anyone to match up with, especially a 40-year-old Jared Cannonier who didn't look bad in the Nassourdine Imavov fight, but was getting beaten points. I thought the fight was 2-1 going into the fourth. I thought Cannonier won the first and the third. I thought Imavov won the second. The fourth was definitely trending in the direction of Imavov, but again, that's why I was mad at the stoppage. I thought, again, if they didn't stop the fight, Cannonier could keep going again, and Herzog is very iffy sometimes on his stoppages, but I thought, again, if the fight keeps going, Cannonier is able to survive the fourth round. That fifth round determines who wins the fight. And now, was the fight trending towards a Nassourdine Imavov win? Sure, but you never know if you don't let the guy fight it out. And again, it did save Cannonier from some damage at 40 years old to the point where he can turn around in, 2 months and fight in another main event against Caio Borralho. But it is such a matchup change in this fight with him going from Imavov to Borralho, because Borralho is just so good on the ground. And again, in the last couple of fights, Caio Borralho really hasn't gone to that much. He has shown his striking a lot in his last couple of fights, kind of just because he hasn't needed the grappling much in his last couple of fights. I think the Abus fight, again, didn't want to go on the ground with the Dagestani guy. And I understand, again, Abus is from Dusseldorf, Germany, right? But again, a guy who lived in Dagestan as a kid, grew up in Dagestan, went through the rigor of their Dagestani wrestling programs out there. And again, Abus since then worked on his kickboxing in Germany, but Borralho didn't really want to go through that much, so he just went out there and tried to outstrike Abus Magomedov, and he did. He knocked Abus down in the third round in that fight. In the Paul Craig fight, well, again, Paul Craig is just horrible striking-wise. Caio Borralho was able to knock him out in the second round, was able to do a lot more damage than what Paul Craig was doing on the feet. And again, there was no reason to go to the ground with a very accomplished BJJ player and Paul Craig. Not to say Borralho isn't either, but again, the path of least resistance was on the feet against Paul Craig. But when Borralho has needed it, he has shown a very good grappling game. You look at the Michal Zolsheshek fight. You look at the Arman Petrosyan fight. The Makhmud Muradov fight's interesting because it's close. But Caio Borralho does do enough to win that fight. But Makhmud Muradov definitely did give him the biggest test in that fight. Now you get him and Cannonier. I'm a little bit concerned for Jared Cannonier in this fight. 40 years old. It didn't look horrible in the Imavov fight, coming off those, the knee surgery. Because he did blow out his knee prior to that fight against Imavov. That's why he did not take on Ramondo Lidze at the end of 2023. But at 40 years old, again, he didn't look horrible in the Imavov fight, but did look a little bit slower, at least compared to his really good performance where he looked very good and probably the best he ever did in his career in that dominant win over Marvin Vettori in the Apex. I just think it's a tough fight to prepare for, just because Borralho's striking game is evolving, and just because of the grappling too. Again, we say it all the time. We said it earlier about Edmund Shahbazyan too, and about how he's going to approach his fight with Gerald Meerschaert. But again, for Caio Borralho, your grappling and your wrestling and your jiu-jitsu makes your striking that much better. Because again, that is in the back of Jared Cannonier's mind this entire fight. Because again, Caio Borralho is so well accomplished with his BJJ, with his wrestling, and the way he's been able to control guys and handle guys on the ground. That's always going to be in the back of Jared Cannonier's mind. And again, Cannonier's always going to be worrying about that potential threat of the takedown. So Caio Borralho, again, will have more opportunities and more pathways to win this fight on the feet because of that. And that's why I think Caio Borralho wins this fight. I think Borralho gets it done. I think he wins 49-46. I think it goes the distance. And yes, we have not seen Borralho in a 5-round environment so far in the UFC, but I do think he's able to go out there. And I think it's going to be, again, takedown after takedown after takedown, which does push Caio Borralho towards victory in this fight. I'm taking the Brazilian to win this one by unanimous decision. We're taking Caio Borralho. Again, I think you see a mixture of the striking and the wrestling, but I just think, again, Cannonier, he's 40 years old at 185 pounds. That is really rough. Again, his best days are probably behind him at this point. I think Caio Borralho gives him a lot of trouble, both with, again, his striking and his wrestling and his BJJ. And I think this is the fight that gets Caio Borralho in the top 5 of the UFC's middleweight division. And again, it's simple to match up from here. Dricus du Plessis is the reigning champion and on his way to potentially being the greatest middleweight of all time. I understand Anderson Silva, but still, Dricus, again, hey, beats Strickland again, beats the winner of Whitaker and Chimaev, beats a couple more guys. Pereira comes down, maybe Dricus again. Again, it's a very long time in the future, but du Plessis is, building a legacy at 185 pounds right now. But anyways, du Plessis Strickland's the fight there. Whitaker versus Chimaev. You go Imavov and Allen are already booked. Caio Borralho, they're not going to do him and Israel Adesanya. Why would Izzy fight Caio Borralho? That's a horrible stylistic matchup. They will give Caio Borralho Marvin Vettori, which I don't think is that bad of a fight. Because again, Vettori can wrestle, and I think that'd be a very good test for Caio Borralho. Vettori's at 6, Borralho's going to be at 5. That's a really good fight to do, or I guess Vettori will slide down to 7, but still 5 versus 7. I think that's a really good fight to do. Throw it in a main event in Brazil on a fight night. I'd be down for that. I think that should be the next fight for Caio Borralho. If Jared Cannonier does win, though, I think he should get the winner of Brendan Allen versus Nassourdine Imavov. If it's Imavov, it's a rematch of the fight that got stopped early. If it's Brendan Allen, new matchup, it works. So we are going to go, though, with Caio Borralho to win the fight by unanimous decision. I think, again, the wrestling and the BJJ is going to play a big factor in this fight because, again, that will set up the striking game that Caio Borralho will be able to pull off here against the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier. So, folks, thank you all for watching our UFC Fight Night predictions with Jared Cannonier and Caio Borralho in the main event. If you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. We'll be back for PFL predictions tomorrow. Folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. And Mamba, forever.